and welcome back. Here we are with section 1, Understanding Our Environment, B, second part if you will. Your essential question: what are several specific problems with the planet's population growth? I find it might be helpful to kind of put somewhere in there that this is section 1, section 2. When you're organizing your notes later, it's a lot easier to work it out. So if you have this one with a title section 1B, it'll be much easier. Well, kicking off here, we're going to talk about Spaceship Earth. Well, what is Spaceship Earth? Well, if you think about it, it makes sense. Earth is just a large rock in space circling around the sun. Basically, if we don't have it on the planet, we're not getting it. It's not like we're going to order up to Mars for them to bring us some iron over or anything else. Basically, if it's not here, we can't get it. And if we use it up, it's gone. So we can't dispose of it either. If we create trash, it's here on the planet. We can't just blast it off into the sun. The expense, etc., is just way too much. So it's a closed system, just like this terrarium here. It's a closed system. So I have some rocks, I've got some water, my soil, and my plants. And you can see where we're getting water vapor, the water cycle doing its thing, but this is a closed system. Right now, nothing gets in, nothing gets out with the exception of energy. So this closed system is very similar to our planet. It's a closed system. Sunlight comes in, so energy comes into the system, and when the planet spins around in its nighttime, energy in the form of heat leaves the planet. But everything else is here. Matter remains the same. Yes, you can argue that some meteors fall in and some dust or other particles escape into outer space, but it's minor. That's about like me being concerned with my weight if a fly lands on my shoulder. I don't even realize the fly is there. And we're talking about meteors landing on the planet from space that's much, much less than the mass of a fly in comparison. This is like me saying, as I walked to the scale, I wound up gaining weight because of the dust hitting me. Well, the skin cells falling off of me, the dust landing on, it all evens out. So really, no matter comes in, no matter goes out from the planet Earth, only energy. So this is what we mean by Spaceship Earth. So as we're traveling through outer space, if we don't have it, we're not getting it. And if we do have it, we pretty much have to keep it. So this kind of closed system can provide some potential problems. Like my closed system here with my plant. Plants taking in the carbon dioxide, giving out some oxygen, but plants don't only give off carbon dioxide. They actually give off some oxygen. They also give off some carbon dioxide at night. But anyway, if it's not in here, I can't get it in. So if I didn't start it with the right amount of nutrients and water, etc., things would die. If certain pollutants built up too much, then also things could die. So resources are limited. The amount of water that's in there is all the water that can get in there. The amount of air in there is all that can get there. So in a closed system, resources are limited. So as the population grows, if my plant gets bigger, it still can only take the amount of air or carbon dioxide that's actually in there. So resources get used more rapidly. And there's a possibility that on Spaceship Earth, our Earth, we can produce waste more quickly than we can actually dispose of them. They build up. So environmental problems actually happen on different scales. It can be local, like just what's happening in my community. We may talk about, we need a landfill for our community. Where are we going to put this excess trash? Well, it could be regional. We might get water from, say, the Santa Fe River, But if it winds up getting polluted 1,000 miles upstream, it still affects us. So that can be a regional problem. It wasn't our fault. We didn't do it. They polluted it up there, but we're having to deal with the issue because our water's now polluted. Or a global one might be the depletion of the ozone layer. If the ozone layer gets depleted, well, too much UV radiation making through, and this affects all of us. So any of these kind of problems, local, regional, or globally, are things that in environmental science we're concerned with, we have to think about. And a lot of this comes down to population growth. Many scientists believe the human population is going to double in the 21st century. We started the 21st century at about 7.5 billion, something like that. So if we're talking 15 billion people by the end of the 21st century, in just 100 years, doubling our needs. It means we need double the food, we're producing double the trash, we need double the electricity. Yeah, you can kind of go through the possible ideas until it stabilizes. Every population goes through a growth rate until it reaches equilibrium. At some point, the resources limit how many more people or animals, deer, etc. can be born. In a certain set of woods, it may only support 100 deer. If there are 200 deer, either some of the deer die or some of the deer have to leave. On the planet Earth, leaving isn't really an option. There is no planet B. So because of these predictions of our population growth, we can expect pressure on the environment is going to continue to increase. And as the human population grow and its need for food and resources, more people we have on the planet, we need more food. We need more land to produce the food. And as we study this year, you'll realize it's a constant struggle between the need for space for trash, the need for space to grow food, the need for space to live. These things are in limited supply. Once again, Spaceship Earth can only grow so much. And this takes to some of our resource depletion. So up in purple is your new key term, resource depletion. Remember, in red, that's a vocab word, you've already done it. And if it's in blue, I'm trying to minimize what you need to write. I feel it's an important point, but it's something you should probably already know, or we've already sort of touched on it earlier in our notes. In this case, natural resources, it's a vocab word, you've already done it. So this is going to be any natural materials that are used by man, whether it's water, of course mine's coffee, petroleum products like oil, gasoline, maybe something simple like iron in this nail, wood, which we might use for building purposes, etc., minerals, which we may dig up out of the ground for various reasons, forest, animals, etc. Just these natural resources, water, air that we breathe, etc. Now these resources are either renewable or non-renewable. This will be the focus of one of our early labs, is trying to identify that. For instance, wood is renewable. Now it's kind of interesting, when you look at the definition of renewable, it says it'll come back in a short time. Now, what does that mean? And it's debated. But here's the thing, if you will kind of think about it this way, in the span of a human lifetime, will it come back? If it will, we pretty much consider it renewable. Now once again, that's a little bit on the long end of the scale, but it tends to work. If we use it, but if in my lifetime it'll come back, reusable. So wood, because sure, I cut down a tree, 10, 15, 20 years later, the tree is back and somebody else can use it. So renewable. As opposed to things like oil, well, if I use up the oil, the earth is in the process of making new crude oil. When I die, my oils will seep down into the ground. When algae dies, all the plants die, or animals, really, bacteria. The oils leak back down into the ground. But it can take hundreds and thousands, if not millions of years to produce oil. So hundreds of thousands? No, it's not renewable. The Earth is in the process of doing it, but for humans, we do not consider that a renewable resource. Things like copper or metals or this iron, renewable or non-renewable? Is the Earth in the process of making more iron? Sure. Is it going to make new iron in my lifetime? No, not so much. So it's actually non-renewable. It's recyclable, but don't get recyclable confused with renewable. If I use this up, I put it all in a spaceship and I send it off the planet, I'm not going to have a new supply of it in my lifetime. There's a lot on the planet, but once we actually use it, it's going to be too long for the planet to make more. So, wood renewable, plant sources, etc., but oil not so much. What about oxygen? Renewable, non-renewable? Yeah, it's renewable. Plants are continuously making new oxygen. If we sucked it all up right now, all the plants are in the process of making new oxygen right now. So it's also renewable. Well, let's look at pollution. Now, pollution is your heading. It's also your first note, but it's a vocab term. Well, if we look at pollution, let's do a real simple example here. I've got a little bit of an accelerant to make this go a little quicker, hopefully, but we're just going to start a basic fire. See if I can get my fire to catch so it'll actually burn. There we go. Kind of want to get my fire going enough to where it will eventually, my accelerant is just alcohol, so it burns pretty hot, but I'm trying to get my sticks to actually catch fire. Because once the sticks begin to catch fire, they go through a chemical change, giving off energy, and they're changing from wood into ash, just pure carbon. So if I cover it up, it goes out, we begin to get some of the pollution, so as the smoke. So the pollution in here, as it begins to gather and caught, it's trapped in this area. So anything in there has to live with the pollution. This is much like us. Go ahead and put it out. Anything that is this excessive waste, it can be heat, noise, radiation, in this case the smoke or smog, but it's this accumulation of waste, and now I have this, what to deal with it. This is what tends to cause us issues or problems. Two main types when it comes down to it. We have biodegradable, like my piece of cardboard here. If I were to toss this out into my yard or into the woods or somewhere, in time it would break down because it came from trees. It was originally a tree, turned it into the paper. Rain, sun, weather will eventually beat it down and it'll break down into the environment. It'll take a while. It might be a few months, but it is biodegradable. It will break back down into the environment, and then other trees will use it back again. However, some things are non-biodegradable, like my plastic bag here. Can't be broken down by natural processes. Or the slide talks about mercury, for instance. Mercury gets into the environment, it doesn't get broken down. Nothing eats this. So I throw this thing off to the side of the road, 10, 20, 30, 200 years later, it's still there. Non-biodegradable. So our biodegradables don't create as great a problem as our non-biodegradables. So yeah, trash, there's something we have to do for it, something we have to do with it. put it somewhere, and it creates a big issue, this aspect of pollution. Now, degradable ones, like my box or even a piece of wood, once again, eventually it's going to break down. They really only cause problems when they accumulate faster than they can be broken down. For instance, if I got newspaper and I threw my newspaper out in my backyard every day when I was done with it, pretty soon my yard would be full of newspaper. Can't break it down quickly enough for me to just throw it in my backyard. But in a larger landfill area somewhere, or if we help the process along, getting it wet, it might. But the non-biodegradable ones, like our plastics, or like the oil, but the plastic container that this is in, they don't break down. And they can build up to really dangerous levels in our environment if we're not careful. Once again, this isn't going anywhere. I could melt it, I could shrink it down, get it into a smaller amount, but it's not going to break down and go back into the environment. Nothing can use it as fertilizer, nothing's going to eat it as a food source, so it creates a problem. And as we have pollutants take out areas of land that we need for farming or for living space, etc., and there are environmental issues with trash and pollution, then we have a loss of biodiversity. So this kind of last key term is this loss of biodiversity. Just what it sounds like. Bio, term for living, and diversity, diverse, many living things. Well, loss of many living things. So the variety of organisms in any given area. My backyard, it's going to have bees in it, there are wasps back there are lizards in it, ants in the ground, I get little no-see-um bugs, I have squirrels out there, birds come into my backyard, my dog roams around in it, the cat goes back there, all that stuff, the grass, the trees, the weeds, this is all biodiversity of my backyard. Well, the genetic variation within that population, the species, the community is really what all helps. All the squirrels have different slight differences, so when they mate they can adapt and have a unique squirrel to its environment, or etc. So all of these organisms, whether it's the bacteria that are breaking down my tree, piece of wood, a dead animal, the grass, the trees, the squirrels, etc., these are all our natural resources that are beneficial to this in some shape, form, or fashion. I might depend on them for food, like cows, chickens, pigs, etc., corn, green beans, barley, wheat, lentils, rice, you name it. I need the oxygen that the grass is producing, the trees are producing, the weeds are producing to breathe, and for many other things as well. The problem is there's only a fraction of all the species that once roamed the earth that are alive today. You know, like the dinosaurs or the giant sloth or the giant bison, cave bears. These things are all extinct. The white rhino, the last male died last year. So they are virtually extinct. There's still a couple of the females left, but once they die, they're gone forever. You and I are living in a time where we're seeing mass extinctions. Many species dying out. Now, yes, many of these are insects or very small organisms, but as we cut down areas of rainforest, different areas to turn it into living space or farms, many species are dying out. Some of our big animals, big cats, they're not around. The Florida panther is endangered because, well, I want the Florida panther, but I don't want it in my backyard or roaming my neighborhood. That's where my children, my pets play. So as humans grow and fend in, we sometimes fight off or kill off, either on purpose or sometimes by mistake, other species. We believe if this current extinction rate continues, it could wind up causing problems for the human race, because all of these species have potential benefit in some way. We know if we remove one species from the food chain, it affects the rest of the food chain. Things used to eat this, now they don't eat that, they have to eat other things. And those populations go down, or this population dies off because that population died off. There's all kinds of problems. But our species here today on the planet have potential scientific value, potential aesthetic value, potential recreational value. So it's important for us to preserve them, because sometimes we don't know how important something is until we've lost it. Loss of biodiversity. That wraps it up for us today. Some of these terms are things we will come back to over and over, and this term biodiversity is one of those. It's an important factor within environmental science, along with the impact of humans and sustainability. Once again, that's it for us today. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next time.